Look at this ceiling. Look at the state of that. It's about to collapse. That could just drop at any moment. I'm going to show you in this video how we go from that, taking it down, to then repairing it with plaster, and eventually finishing it like this. When Claire and Dave first bought the house, they noticed that every time they had a bath, a leak came through the kitchen ceiling. They had a few goes at fixing this little leak at first and a few goes at patching up the ceiling, but in the end they decided it was time to call in a plumber and a plasterer. I'm Kirk Johnstone and you are watching On The Trowel.
So the first thing we need to do, the ceiling dips down. The water has damaged the ceiling that much, it dips. So what we need to do is find out where that curve actually starts, because what you'll find with a water damaged ceiling, you can't really push it back up because it's been soaked, it goes brittle. So if you try and, say we cut here and it actually curves down before that, if we try and push it back up, it starts to snap off and break. So it's just easier to just work back to where it actually starts to dip down and cut it there.
You can see how much the ceiling's dropped. Look at this when I push the rule up to the ceiling. What I'm going to do is go all over the ceiling with a straight edge. I'm going to find where the dip starts. I'm going to mark it off with a pencil so I know which section needs to be cut out. I'm going to take this part of the ceiling down and leave it overnight so that they can check that the leak's definitely been fixed, because it's hard to access from the bathroom. I'm cutting through the ceiling with the axe part of a plasterer's hammer because a multi-tool will potentially cut through the laths and weaken the remaining part of the ceiling. The laths are the little timber strips. It's always best to replace plaster like for like, but in this case, rather than solid plastering back onto the laths, because all the laths are shot, we're going to use plasterboard. We won't have to replace any lath. This will be faster and cheaper. If you look carefully, you can see I've marked the joists off on the ceiling. You want to screw the plasterboard back into the joists and not just depend on trying to screw into the laths. This way you'll get a nice solid fixing. I'm using 45mm coarse thread drywall screws. Once the board was screwed in place, we sealed around the edges with SBR where we're going to blend into with the plaster. We also sealed around the top of the walls because we're going to tie those in.
Okay, so this is where we're at now. This is the condition of the ceiling. As you can see here, there's some right thick sections to build down, and then there's some bits that are flush. So the easiest way for us to do this now is to use a BACKCOAT plaster. You've got two different types of BACKCOAT plaster, the British Gypsum make. One is hardwall, one is bonding coat. Now hardwall is designed for high suction backgrounds. We've got plasterboard and we've got sealed ceiling, so that's a low suction background, so we've got to use bonding coat. So we're going to float this down now with bonding coat. Now usually we would use feather edge rules because we'll get it dead flat, but if you look carefully over here, the rest of the ceiling has got a bit of a dip in it. Now we could have took that section down as well, but the more I check the whole ceiling is up and down because it's an old ceiling, been overboarded at some point. Customers just want this hole fixing, so they don't want to rip the whole kitchen ceiling out completely, so we're just fixing this up. Now, with that in mind, rather than using a feather edge rule, we're going to use the speed skin to rule it off. Now, it will keep its shape to a degree, but it will also flex ever so slightly and help us get feathered in to the original ceiling. So Leighton's going to mix up some bonding coat plaster now, and we'll get this done. Right, all these edges, These will all need scrimming, but when you get bigger lips like this, the scrim can tend to kick up. So it's easier to fill it all out first, get it nice and flat, and keep this edge nice and clean so you can see where the joint is, and then put this scrim over the joint once it's been filled out.
Now you'll notice that this bonding coat is grey. Sometimes you'll open a bag of BACKCOAT and it'll be the pink colour or the terracotta colour, the same colour as the finishing plasters. Now it doesn't really matter, the only difference is it just depends where British Gypsum have mined it from. Some people say that the pink BACKCOAT sets quicker than the grey, but ultimately it doesn't really matter because I'm going to show you a little trick in a minute. I'll show you how to make this set quite quick. There were certain parts where the plasterboard was actually flush with the original ceiling and it didn't really need any BACKCOAT plaster going on it. But what I want to work with is an even suction from the background, so I'm going to coat it all, and the bits that didn't need it will just get a very, very tight coat. This way, when I put the finishing plaster on, it'll all pull in at the same speed. If you're building BACKCOAT plaster up more than say 1.5 inches in thickness, then you're better off doing it in successive coats. So put your first coat on and let it set. You don't need to wait for it to dry out, it just needs to set before you put your second coat on. When you're ruling off, make sure you go both ways.
Any little hollows or misses, once you give it a rule over, you can identify them and fill them out. Now, ideally, if you were trying to get this perfect, then you would use a metal feather edge or H-section rule or a derby. Derbies aren't quite as true as feather edges. The fact that we're trying to blend into a ceiling that's all over the place, it just makes more sense to use a bit more of a flexible rule that's going to actually go in with the shape of the ceiling where it joins up to it.
Basically what I'm saying is the original ceiling has got very gentle curves and hollows and dips in it, and if I put this in perfectly flat, it'll sort of look like a piece of ice floating on top of water. It'll stand out, but that's perfectly flat and it doesn't flow in with the rest of the ceiling. So I'm using the speed skim because it'll literally bend a little bit as we join onto the ceiling and roll and flow with it.
What I want to do is identify the edge of the ceiling, like so I can see where the scrims need to go. Okay, so now all the scrims are on. So where all the joints were before, that we would originally scrim, because of the difference in the depths, it's easier to scrim it after it's been filled out. All the scrims are in place now. Now what we want this to do is set rather quick. And the best way to do that, I want to put some stuff over the top of these scrims. So the best way to make that go off quicker is if Leighton now takes this outside, wets that up with a bit of water, and I put another little tight coat all over this now as if I'm skimming, and because he's wet it up, it'll start the chemical reaction a little bit quicker and this will start to set. So Leighton's going to go and wet this up a little bit, and I'm going to put a little tight coat over everything and cover these scrims over. So now I've got a nice wet mix just to go over the top, and it's like finish. Okay, so you can see this stuff now is literally the consistency of skim, really. Very, very thin, very watery. This would be no good for building out. This is literally just a little tight coat we're going to put over to cover over the scrims And to start the setting process, the chemical reaction, we're encouraging this to set faster by mixing it up again. And once this starts to kick in and set, it'll also set that, so it just cuts down the waiting time a little bit. Now, there will be some old school plasterers like my dad. No, you've got to use a metal edge. Don't be using that. But look, let me show you. Let me just show you. It's only because I'm only using that because we're blending in to a ceiling that is out of shape already. If you were to put on this rule, we are literally a millimetre or so out there. I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank our proud sponsors of this video. How many times do you see a sponsored integration start like that? This is the great thing about the actual sponsor of this video, Manscaped. They just let me say whatever I want to say. So, Manscaped sent me out this little package. Let's take a look inside and see what you get. Stuff for all the awkward little bits like up your snozzer and in your ear holes. I'm not going to say too much about this, but you'll get the gist of it from what it says here. This isn't just for shaving your face. You can use it on other parts of your body as well. And once you go in, it's got a nifty little light so you can see in those dark areas. Now, as well as that, this is for shaving and trimming and shaping your beard. Now, you all know I like sporting a beard, so this is going to come in very handy. Now, the great thing about this, what I love about this is, it's waterproof. I can take it in the shower with me. Now, I know you're going to want to see me in these. No chance. Even the missus isn't allowed to see this. They send you some nice, soft, stretchy underpants, t-shirt, and a little travel bag to put all your kit in. This is what they call the lawnmower. So these two opposite blades here, these are cutting, and then as you get to the centre part, that's what leaves it nice and smooth. Look at that. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code TROWEL at manscaped.com. Now, on with the show. Now, what a lot of fellas do, they'll go and reach for the devil float, and they'll go in there and let that sort of set. As soon as it starts going dark in patches, they'll hit it the float. Here's the thing with bonding. Bonding doesn't gradually set like sand and cement. These are what you use on sand and cement when you're skimming over. Bonding flash sets, so it's either wet or it's set, which makes floating it with one of these an absolute nightmare. It sticks to the bottom of the float, it drags, it digs in, it's a bit of a pain in the backside. One way you could do it is let it completely set and then just run your float over it to provide a key. But here's the kicker, With a gypsum based back coat, you don't actually need a key. The gypsum will stick to itself. It's only if you're using sand and cement and then putting gypsum on top of it that you need a key. Now, I've always just got it nice and flat, ruled it off, smoothed it with a trowel and then skimmed it. Now, my dad used to give me grief over this because he was old school, brought up sand and cement, so he's always wanted to put a key into bonding. Here's the thing, I've been doing it my way for years. I think British Gypsum twigged onto the way I recommend doing it, and they've changed what they say on the bags. Because now, if you read their installation guide, apply subsequent layers once the first coat is firm to the touch. We've only had to do one layer, so that doesn't apply to us. Final trowel once the second coat is firmed up. Lubricate trowel with minimal water. Finish with this or multi-finish or any of the other finishes. And that's it. There's no mention of floating or keying or anything. It literally says trowel it once it's starting to set. Go over with the trowel and a bit of water. So we've got that flat enough, we don't even need to do that. We'll just be putting the skim coat. As soon as that's set, we're going to put some skim on it, and I'll show you that just now. See these dark patches? This is where it's starting to set. The bonding coat is actually going off. The whole thing's firm all over. The bits that aren't dark, there's like a bit more slimy on the surface. But the fact that you're getting dark patches means that it's time to skim it. It's going off. See, this whole area here is going dark. Now, you don't need to put any sealer on, no PVA, no SBR, nothing. This is designed to be able to just skim straight over it now. So that's what we're going to do.
So we give the sealant 2 nice coats of finish with a little bit of accelerator added in. We blended in all the scrims on the walls and we feathered in the plaster into the original sealant. Now, I want you to listen to something now. This is the sort of thing I have to put up on a daily basis. And I love the bones of this lad. He's absolutely crackers. But listen to this.
You don't even actually look for things, you know.
No, I just look in the last place where it used to live.
Because this was exactly where it does live.
In my toolbox.
No? In the render box?
That's about it. Because me and Sam both looked in the render box.
Did you move the render box?
Eh?
Did you move the render box?
No.
Or did you just look at the render box?
Pulled things out of it and looked inside it.
Well, if you'd moved it about a centimetre across, you would have thought, oh, what's that little white handle?
Underneath the box.
No, next to the box.
Oh, so it wasn't actually in the box.
Basically it was.
Basically outside of it. Okay.
Either way you would have found it, it was a centimetre next to the layout, literally. In the little hollow where the 2 boxes touched, it was there.
Just waiting. Just waiting.
Yeah, waiting to be found.
I need say no more. I rest my case.
It's imperative. Imperative, that's a big word for me. When you're blending in, don't go that way with your trowel because you will cause a little bump. You've got to use water. You've just got to, okay? Just trust me with that one. And then go across it like this. Because what you want is to never see that join. There's fellas that always say, me, you'll see the join. I promise you, if you do it like this, you won't. It literally feathers into the texture of the paint to nothing. But you've got to go across. Okay, so a little bit of water like this. Brushy, brush. And then see, you're just feathering it in. Now every now and then you'll pick up a little bit of crap or you'll tear the plaster a little bit. It just needs a little bit more water and go again.
In the skimming process, the finishing plaster is applied in 2 coats. It gets flattened in once and then it gets 2 wet trowels and it's finally finished off with a polish. Just before the polish, we have to attend to the angles where the sealant's been tied into the walls. That junction needs finishing off nicely, making sure that the corner, right in the very corner over there, hasn't got a little hole in it. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. I use a little bit of kit called the Plasterer's Small Tool. It's very pointy at the end, so it means you can get right in tight into the corner and fill it out with a little bit of thick plaster. A lot of fellas try and do that with just the angle brush, and they'll brush it in and they'll put water basically in there and it looks filled out, but as soon as it starts to dry or somebody pokes in there with a paintbrush, it just falls in again. So it's always important to fill it with a nice little bit of solid plaster. I've wiped some on the side of my bucket from the start of the mix. When you're polishing the plaster, you don't need to wet it, but you can lubricate the bottom of your trowel so it doesn't stick.
After all this, I hope we've got that leak fixed. There we go. We're done. Lane's hiding out the way of the camera. Should we go, mate? What was it the good shepherd said? Let's get the flock out of here.
I hope you enjoyed that. If you would like to see more interesting educational plastering videos, then make sure you subscribe to my channel. It's absolutely free.